All right, we're back.
I'm going casual. Y'all keep going.
Okay, well, Dan's going to go casual, but I do want him to talk about this new book sponsor that we got when he sits back down. Apparently, producer Tommy is saying that the energy was low first half.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, so that's on you a little bit.
Well, bring the book out.
Yeah, bring the
that should
book
pick
out.
things up.
I think the book is good because it's a book that we all feel pretty close to in a lot of different ways. But Dan, can you show us this?
A
this
dear
new
friend
sponsor?
got this because they knew I was having problems. So it's a joke. Never mind. Get over it.
Dan, I want to know like any interesting courtroom stories or one that sticks out or something that like you feel like would make for a good podcast listen.
Yeah. So we were talking. We were talking about my 50th high school reunion a minute ago, and it brought back memories of this case. So every male has the memory of the hot teacher in high school. Every single male has that hot teacher memory, right? And at Stratford High School in 1975, the hottest teacher by far was a woman named Marion Wiggins. I think Marion was probably in her late 20s when we were in our late teens, and she was a beautiful gal. I think she was a cheerleader at UT. At least that was the suggestion floating around the halls. But beautiful gal. So life goes on, and of course she never would return my glance, no matter how often I looked her way in math class. And life would go on, and probably 15 years later, I'm in a multi-defendant case representing a good friend of mine named Larry Ramming. Ramming was a mortgage broker and was falsely accused of mortgage fraud, loan fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, bank fraud, all the frauds. And it was a case he should have never been charged with, but he was charged with. And we were in trial in front of Judge Hoyt. Judge Hoyt is one of my favorite judges. I just love the man. He's thoughtful. He's objective. He's fair. He's decent. He has a good sense of humor. And he's not afraid to call bullshit. And he's not afraid to call, a bowling ball, or whatever. So we're in trial, and we found out that the prosecutor had just time after time after time. We caught her lying, cheating, and stealing. Her name was Julia Hyman. She is appropriately named Hyman. And Judge Hoyt said at one point, Miss Hyman, I'm afraid or I'm concerned that either you or a lawyer representing you in the future will take the position that your remarks to me are not subject to a review for perjury because they're not sworn to. And she said, well, Judge, I don't know how to respond. And he said, I do. Raise your right hand. Whereupon all the wind in the room was sucked out, because that's something I'd never seen before in my life, where a judge swears in a prosecutor to make sure that her remarks could be used for prosecuting her later on. It was remarkable. So we felt pretty good about our chances after that, and we'd filed a motion to dismiss based upon prosecutorial misconduct that Judge Hoyt would grant the next day, and we were pretty confident that we were going to win that motion. So the clients, we'd been in trial for weeks, and the clients invited their wives and their spouses and whatever to come, and sure enough. One of Larry's co-defendants was a guy named Wiggins, and I never put two and two together. But sure enough, I turned around, and on the second row, right there, was the famous Marion Wiggins, my former high school hot teacher. So not only did we win that day in a major way, I got to impress, although I probably didn't. The hottest teacher from my high school some 15 years after the fact.
Did she return the glance? Or?
She did return the glance. She couldn't have been sweeter. She was very nice. And sadly, Marion died probably 5 or 6 years after that from cancer. But a lovely gal.
Can you the practice of like swearing in the courtroom? Where do you know where that like originates from, or the kind of?
I don't know the historical basis. I do know that I've never seen a judge swearing a lawyer because they'll take your word for it. Generally speaking, as it's if a lawyer is making a representation to a judge, they usually will avoid the necessity of swearing that lawyer in by saying, "Well, you're an officer of the court. I trust you," and that's the only time I've ever seen a judge swear a lawyer in.
It's usually witnesses who get sworn.
It is, for sure.
Do you feel like over time, Dan, that has lost its, I don't know, I feel like a little bit of its power per se to you're kind of swearing to God, right? I mean,
I don't know that it's lost its significance in that sense. I do see far fewer of the really weak cross-examinations fueled by such gems as you're under oath, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that used to be a thing in my youth, but every now and then you'll see a lawyer go there, but rarely effectively.
Yeah, I find that interesting. Dan, we want to keep this like high energy and have fun with it, but there are serious things happening, and we want to kind of cover them and get your insight, and people care to hear what you have to say from your angle and your experience. Ex-FBI Director James Comey was hit with perjury and obstruction charges as of late September 25. The arraignment's locked for October 9th in Alexandria. DOJ claims he lied in Congress in 2017 about the Steele dossier, sourcing during the Russia probe and leaked memos to spark the Mueller special counsel against Trump. Fallout's already ugly. 2 top Virginia prosecutors got the boot amid the heat and whispers of Kash Patel pulling strings for revenge. Smells like politics clashing with proof. What's your read on this unfolding and the whole Comey indictment?
Look, I think both sides have engaged in the weaponization of the criminal justice system. I think what's happening here is taking it to the next level. The backstory, as I understand it, is Trump had appointed a fellow by the name of Eric Siebert, who was appointed specifically to get Letitia James indicted. He refused to do that. The Eastern District of Virginia, to those of folks outside the criminal justice world, the 2 alpha males, alpha female offices, whatever we want to call them, are the Southern District of New York and the Eastern District of Virginia. Both of those groups are, for lack of a better description, big balls and cowtown players. They come armed, ready to the teeth, and ready to go. They are not playing. They are not kind. They are not nice. They are not benevolent. They are coming. And they are staffed by very effective prosecutors, good resumes, hard-charging people. It's one of the last places you want to be charged is in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is known as the Rocket Docket, and the Southern District of New York, they're very aggressive. So anyway, Trump ostensibly wants Letitia James prosecuted. Eric Siebert made it known that he didn't believe there was probable cause to do that. Trump gave him the choice, or he came to the fork in the middle of the road where he would either get fired or resign. So he resigned. Trump later claimed, even though he resigned, that he fired him, and he was never a good prosecutor all along, and he was surrounded by liberals, even though Trump is the one that appointed him. And then we have the situation with Comey. Again, another United States attorney was appointed to bring in specifically to get James Comey. As I understand it, the entire office, or there was an office-wide memo pointing out the fact that the office, the Eastern District of Virginia office, didn't believe that Comey had committed the acts. There was an internal memo. This Halligan woman, who was previously Trump's personal lawyer, was appointed as U.S. attorney. She ostensibly didn't have anybody else in the office to present the case to a grand jury, and presented it by herself to the grand jury. She's the person that signed the indictment, and to have the United States attorney sign an indictment is extremely outside the bell curve of normalcy, and to have the reality that no one in the entire office would apparently go in with her to the grand jury is also way outside the bell curve. So we're going to wait and see what happens, but I ain't predicting that he's going to serve any time, any time, any place.
Do you think, as a former FBI like top dog that Comey was, does that rep shield him from a jury, or does it paint a bigger target for him?
It depends. Well, look, he wouldn't be indicted but for that, right? It depends on your jury. And again, I'm not trying to go all anti-Trump, but it certainly seems like this is weaponization of the criminal justice system taken to its highest level so far.
Can you, Dan, I'm curious, can you give me a quick, like a list of maybe the top 4 U.S. federal districts that you don't want to be prosecuted in?
Sure. Southern District of New York, Eastern District of New York, Eastern District of Virginia, maybe Southern District of Texas after that. We're in the top 6 or 8 toughest for sure. But the difference between what happens, it's almost a commerce distinction between the Eastern District of Virginia and the Southern District of New York and everybody else, because those prosecutors typically go on to high-paying careers with bigger firms, and they transition from making $180,000 a year to $2 or $3 million a year pretty quickly. That doesn't happen in the Southern District of Texas. It's not a way station on its way to make you a lot more money. So. And that goes back to, let's just do the math. In order to have a high-paying defense job or a high-paying job as a defense lawyer, you are necessarily dependent on a U.S. Attorney's Office that prosecutes white-collar cases or significant or complex cases. They do that in New York, so there's plenty of business for defense lawyers. They do that in the Eastern District of Virginia, which is plenty of business for the Washington, D.C. lawyers. They don't do that here in Texas, and frankly have never done that for reasons I can't quite wrap my mind around. And that's not a slash at the individuals currently in the office here, but historically, the Southern District of Texas has prosecuted very few complex matters, considering the size of this district, which goes from Houston to El Paso, and they've never prosecuted a case of significance relating to environmental here, relating to the medical center here, relating to a lot of areas that would seem to be obvious areas to focus on for prosecution, but they've never done that.
In the Comey case, if you were on his defense team, what's your opening move to control the narrative or flip it in his favor?
Well, my opening move would try to be the case get dismissed for a couple of reasons. Number one, sure seems to be a poster child for selective prosecution. The other basis, at least insofar as I understand it, is since the president originally appointed a U.S. attorney, they can appoint an interim U.S. attorney, but it's my understanding that a memo actually written by now Justice Alito, when he was with the Department of Justice, indicated that a president could only appoint one interim U.S. attorney. He could not keep appointing successive U.S. attorneys. So the argument is that this Halligan woman was not appropriately appointed, and if she was not appropriately appointed, that indictment should be dismissed. The problem there is the statute of limitations ostensibly ran on September 30th. So if that is in fact the case, if she was improperly appointed, that indictment must be dismissed, and they can't re-indict James Comey because the statute of limitations has run.
Teaser Pony, can you kind of enlighten me on what selective prosecution means?
Sure. So when you go after someone not because they committed a crime, but because you're trying to get that person in trouble for your own personal gain, right? So to Dan's earlier point about weaponization, and Comey not doing something that, or is opposition, or is an opponent, not an opponent, but like somebody that Trump sees as opposition, right? And so using law enforcement, using prosecution to go after him is sort of a textbook case of what we're seeing here.
Dan, have you ever defended someone where the charges screamed payback? How do you expose that in the court?
Yeah, I've got a great example of payback. So Once upon a time, there was a fellow by the name of Bob Nestoroff. Bob Nestoroff was head of the DPS Narcotics Enforcement Section here in Texas. He was a big deal. And Bob was surveilling a particular dope dealer in Florida, and let's just say the dope dealer was supposedly, according to the prosecution, had just dropped off a load in Miami when Nestoroff saw him at the same time in Fort Lauderdale. I'm probably mixing up the cities, but you get the idea. So the U.S. attorney there in Florida, or the assistant United States attorney in Florida, wanted Nestoroff to testify that the drug dealer was in one place when Nestoroff said he was in fact another, and Nestoroff told this AUSA, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to testify truthfully, and truthfully is he was in Fort Lauderdale and he wasn't in Miami. And so the AUSA said, okay, if you do that, I'm going to indict you for perjury and obstruction of justice. And Nestoroff told him, you do what you need to do, but I'm going to testify to the truth. So he testified both at this fellow's grand jury and his trial that the dope dealer was where Nestoroff saw him at, which was in Fort Lauderdale as opposed to Miami. Well, despite Bob's testimony, the fellow was convicted, and then the prosecutor in Miami came after Nestoroff for for perjury and obstruction of justice. So we actually ended up having the dope dealer's lawyer, who was famously F. Lee Bailey, testify. Yes, Nestoroff testified at trial. Yes, the testimony supported, or the facts supported Nestoroff's testimony. And yes, in my opinion, a little bit of a stretch here, but yes, in my opinion, Nestoroff was testifying truthfully. So not only did Nestoroff get indicted and prosecuted, but he went to trial and was acquitted. He should have been acquitted, but to have the confluence of those circumstances and have F. Lee Bailey as a defense witness was kind of singular. For those of you younger at home, Lee Bailey was one of the lawyers in the O.J. Simpson case, probably the lead and most experienced and best lawyer in the O.J. cases. This was after O.J. had been acquitted, so Lee was either a saint or a sinner, depending upon what lens you were viewing him through.
So I asked Grok here the four federal district courts that you don't want to be prosecuted in, and its response was the Southern District of New York, the Eastern District of Virginia, the Southern District of Texas, but the one that you didn't mention, and it has here, is the District of New Mexico.
Interesting.
The reasoning being it tops the charts for per capita prosecutions, over 23,000 per 10 million people, driven by border enforcement, high prosecution rates that translate to slim odds for acquittal and lenient outcomes. Now, for the Southern District of Texas, it says it's a border hotspot with massive caseloads in drug trafficking and immigration offenses, boasting 96% conviction rate in felony cases, far above the national average. The sheer volume overwhelms defenses. How do you go, what's your confidence when you're going against those kind of odds?
It's called Thursday. I mean, it's what we do. And I didn't know it was that high here in the Southern District of Texas. It was a 96% conviction rate. Makes me feel pretty damn good. I mean, I got Hall of Fame numbers if that's the actual number. But look, Aaron, a lot of those numbers are padded by rinse and repeat immigration violations, right? And those cases aren't hard to prove. In fact, they're so easy to prove. Just about everybody pleads guilty. So that factors into the conviction rate. If 95% of the people plead guilty, well, they're going to have a pretty high conviction rate.
So Eastern District of Virginia, you mentioned it's called the Rocket Docket. Can you explain what that means?
That means you'll be in trial generally within 90 days after indicted. And you bring up indirectly a good point. As a criminal defense lawyer, it's not unusual at all for a client to say, I want a speedy trial. And no, you don't. No, you don't. Time is your friend. But the judges in the Eastern District of Virginia and really in D.C. as well, those judges are generally very high pedigreed individuals. They're smart people that went to great schools, that have great resumes, many of those judges are looking to angle themselves up to be a circuit court judge or a Supreme Court judge. I think both the Eastern District of Virginia and the D.C. district courts are breeding grounds for circuit court judges and Supreme Court. I haven't done the math, but I bet you they have more per capita, for lack of a better description, judges on the Supreme Court from the Eastern District of Virginia and from the D.C. District courts than any other places.
I've got a question for Dan. I just want to pick your brain. Why does a defendant not want a speedy trial?
I was about to ask.
Yeah, because time is your friend.
Mm-hmm.
Look, it takes time to go through the discovery. It takes time to interview witnesses. It takes time to formulate the right strategies. It takes time to create memos and file motions and file pleadings. All of those things take time. And if you think you can do all that in 90 days, I got a used Rolex to sell you, and I promise you it's legit, right? It's just bullshit.
Yeah.
It does say the speed often leads to pressure for quick pleas and higher conviction rates in complex cases.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And people don't appreciate this, nor should they, but just do the math. If your client is in custody and you are set for trial in 90 days, that is, graciously put 70 days for you to get ready for trial. Simply getting into any detention facility generally takes about an hour. Mm-hmm. The ability for you to meet face-to-face is oftentimes diminished. The ability for you to even bring in a computer is oftentimes very, very difficult. So you are lugging paper over to sit down and review with your client so that both you and he need to assimilate and respond to it. If you had 8 hours a day every day, there's no way you could do it in a complex cases. There's simply not enough time, especially if your client is in custody. Just getting in and getting out of the facility. Again, nobody cares about the rough life of a criminal defense lawyer, but it's a pain in the ass to try to sit down with your client and review discovery in person with them. It's damn near impossible in a complex matter.
I think largely in part two, the first prosecutor that picks up the file is going to be the most hard charging, but when the buck gets passed and time passes, time heals wounds. When you're the third or fourth prosecutor to handle a file, your give a shit is sometimes diminished, and so I think that has sort of an effect on plea outcomes and how trial is going to go.
So your advice to someone who is in a situation where they need strong defense is to just be patient and ask, and let it, don't ask for a speedy trial, let it kind of play its course.
Right. I mean, there might be the exception to that rule, but I think Dan has said this before, the wheels of justice turn slow. So sometimes you got to hang tight, and that's going to be a better play and lead to a better outcome.
Well then, boys, from the FBI leaks to some rap lyrics as evidence, I want to speak a little bit on Young Thug's plea deal. And I know, Dan, you're not as informed with rapper Young Thug. You ever listen to any rap, Dan?
I do listen to rap, but look at me, it's kind of old school rap. I don't know who Young Thug is. I don't get out much.
I can tell you.
What do you think about that name as an artist, Young Thug?
I mean, he's appealing to his demographic. I get it. I understand.
Okay.
I just don't particularly want a defense lawyer saying, "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm young Thug Jones." I'm sure that'll with the pimp hat. Let me stop there. I talked about pimp hats on an episode, and everybody said I was racist. This has nothing to do with race. The garb that I'm talking about was not limited to a given ethnic community. The bad taste is everywhere. It applies across the board. There's a lawyer who I know that has been seen in a cape at the courthouse, and it's just like, what are you doing, dude? It's not funny, this fellow, I won't mention him by name, but he wore it kind of as a lark and a joke. But it's like, what's next? Clown shoes? Mm-hmm. The clown horn, a squirting, daffodil on your lapel. I mean, what are we doing here?
That's funny. Well, Yeah, a lot of comments about, being a dinosaur and your taste of lawyers and your taste of outfits and your taste of music. You don't have any newer age artists that you listen to
In terms of
any genre?
yeah, I mean, I listen to all kinds of music. I just the I don't listen to hip hop. The sort of crossover between country and rap. That stuff.
New. That's a new genre.
It's
That's
awful.
taken over.
It's
taken
just terrible.
It's tough.
What'd you call it?
Hip hop.
Hip hop.
When you got some guy rapping about his beer and his truck, I just no. But nobody cares what music I listen to.
They weren't playing that at the Stratford High School reunion?
No, they were playing, arguably even worse, they were playing music from the late 70s, which was just probably, the disco era to me was the bottom of civilization. That was the worst shit ever created. I'll take Young Thug any day over most of the, who were the... Earth, Wind and Fire's got some talent, but they certainly
Like Bee Gees? Are you thinking
Bee
Bee
Gees.
Gees?
I'm
I like
thinking
Bee Gees, so
well, if we need to talk off air, we can.
it's like you're fired.
Rapper Young Thug. His name is Jeffrey Williams.
Jeffrey Williams.
There you go, Jeffrey Williams.
So, did he grow up in the mean streets of Santa Monica? Jeffrey Williams, and he transitions into Young Thug. What's his zip code? I'm calling bullshit on this guy already.
He's got some interesting
You
affiliates.
I
listen to Young Thug. I went to school in Mississippi, so there were a lot of Atlanta kids, and
There you
that
go.
kind
Yeah.
of bled over.
Rapper Young Thug Jeffrey Williams, he copped a plea deal in Georgia RICO case in August 2025 after 2+ years locked up. Free Young Thug, as you might see online often. Out on probation now, but slapped with 15 years of strict rules like no Atlanta trips without permission and limits on dropping music. Prosecutors twisted YSL lyrics into gang proof, sparking huge backlash on artists' rights. Feels like the system gunning down for fame over facts. Now, Teaser Pony, given what you know, can you break us some of this down for us maybe a little bit?
I think it's been a while since I've read that indictment, but it was a multi-co-defendant case. I think that the indictment had like 90 allegation paragraphs in it. So they were trying to make the connection that Young Thug was sort of financing and promoting and sort of the background of this gang organization, YSL. The problem, I think, obviously that's a really long time to be on probation. And I think his attorney, Brian Steele, was very outspoken about the fact that there wasn't enough evidence to convict Young Thug in this case.
Then why did he plead guilty?
Well, I think on the flip side of it, you've got a lot of murder accusations because the plea happened it was mid-trial.
Okay.
And so you've got dead bodies involved and his name associated with that. And I think being in a co-defendant case like that probably was something that influenced him to take a plea because he's taking a chance at going to a jury, going to a judge for punishment or jury for punishment. He was facing up to a life sentence. So,
Can you explain about the RICO, like what that means?
sure. So, racketeer influenced. Well, Dan knows more about that.
Racketeering influence corrupt organizations.
Which I haven't seen a lot of at the state level, and haven't seen a lot of those prosecutions in federal court recently. But essentially, when 2 or more people use a legitimate business for unlawful purposes,
I think it's 5 or more.
5 or more people use a business for taking on or executing unlawful means.
I think Diddy also had RICO charges.
Which I thought was a bullshit allegation, and they didn't find guilty on that charge. I think the transporting prostitutes made sense. And like during the trial, I had spoken on that, and I never thought that was going to stick because to me it seemed like that prosecution was more appropriate for a state court. It seemed like Diddy was more of an abuser than he was transporting these prostitutes or these women he was dating for the purposes of financial gain.
The reason a prosecutor the reason that prosecutors like to utilize RICO indictments, it allows them to have a lot more types of evidence admitted, right? So it's really expands the area of admissibility for other crimes and other wrongs and other misconduct that you wouldn't otherwise have in a non-RICO indictment. It's Katie barred the door in terms of letting the shit in.
Casting a wider net, right?
Yeah.
So, using rap lyrics as RICO evidence, how do you shred that in front of a jury who doesn't get like the art?
Turn the radio on and listen to every other rapper. I think is the answer there. That's just kind of commonplace in that genre of music. So that's an uphill battle for a prosecutor, and I think that's probably the avenue I would have taken.
Yeah.
The problem with his lyrics is that they were oddly factually similar to other allegations in the indictment. So,
which is like playing with fire, right?
Yeah, I mean,
I've heard the RICO word a lot through rap music, and I'm like, what the hell? They like it is almost a badge of honor.
Well, going to trial and beating a case is a badge of honor, right? So,
I mean, how often do you hear 187 in a rap song, right? Which is the California Penal Code for citation for murder. It's like, okay, whatever.
What's it like advising, Dan, a client when the fame makes the case a little bit of a media circus? And we've somewhat talked about something similar, but what's that like?
Yeah, it adds another nuance or dimension to it, because the more famous your client, whether it's a politician or an athlete or a performer or whatever, the more famous your client, the more consequential the result is to them. In other words, look at Trump. I mean, that's the classic example of a situation where I think, what do I know, but I think if Trump had admitted the contact between he and Stormy Daniels, a jury might have given his defense more significance and more credibility. And again, this is completely anecdotal. My belief is, and it's just that Trump viewed winning the election a whole lot more importantly than winning that trial. And even if he lost the trial, if he won the election, he was never going to be properly punished or held accountable for the conduct that he might be convicted of. So because of that, I think that he wouldn't allow his team to even concede the sexual conduct between he and Stormy Daniels, because that would have cost him votes, right? Again, I don't know this, but I think Trump believes that he's got enough supporters out there. If he says it, they'll believe it, no matter what it is. And he relied upon that perception. And if I'm right about him, he was right, right? So
I mean, that logic seems to be working for him. Back to the Young Thug thing, Anthony. How do these rappers, or how about the inverse? How do the lawyers jostle to get a case like that? Like, how do rappers go? Do you know how that process is? Like, how they pick the right?
I mean, I'm sure it's through referrals.
It has to be.
I think they probably ask somebody in the city that, because it's not like rappers always get indicted with crimes in their hometown, right? So I think they probably ask around and try and find somebody that's handled high-profile cases that knows how to deal with the problem that they're facing.
It's also likely going to come from their agency. I mean, if you're a big boy rapper, you're probably not getting the list of lawyers to meet. It's probably your talent agency or your manager, or your producer, your record company, or StubHub, or who the hell ever, Live Nation. It's going to come through a recommendation from corporate counsel. Oftentimes, it's not.
Dan, another high-profile case. This one actually got dropped recently. Is with Andrew Tate. Andrew Tate's UK criminal charges for rape and human trafficking got dropped by the CPS in September 2025. Evidence is too thin to prosecute, though the civil suits are still grinding on. Tate's camp calls it vindication, after years of headlines. Critics say it's a loophole, not justice. Shows how proof trumps noise in the end. I know you don't know much. You don't follow the guy too often, but his criminal case crumbles on weak evidence. Is this like a system win for due process, or just Tate's luck? Or what's your kind of perspective on something?
You're right. I don't know much about Andrew Tate, except apparently he's one of the kings of the manosphere. I'm just now learning what a manosphere is.
Dan, you're part of the manosphere.
That's frightening. But as I understand it, he had 4 cases dropped, but he's got 20 left. So he ain't out of the woods yet. I do think, and if I'm his lawyer, I'd be doing the same thing his lawyers are doing, which is punching their fist in the air about, what a great vindication it is of all the other cases. I don't know what relation it has to the other cases. I know that any time you've got a case like Tate, which, as we were just talking about earlier, you're concerned for more than just the criminal case. You're concerned about how it's impacting, his influencing and all of that. I do think that he's got a lot more seat time left and before the cases are resolved. But look, whatever it is, it's only a good thing for him. It ain't a bad thing. If at some point cases are won or lost on momentum and persistence as much as anything. So the lack of this could create lack of momentum and confusion and all that. So it ain't nothing but a good thing for him.
Yeah.
Anthony, civil suits are still alive. What's the difference in fighting that versus like criminal heat?
Well, you've got a different burden of proof, and you've got a different, your reasoning is different, right? So in a case like that, I mean, they're after money, the complainants in those cases, as opposed to the prosecutors in the criminal cases being after holding him accountable for crimes and potentially putting him in prison. So those are the biggest differences. But I think as far as making the case, whether you're the prosecutor or the plaintiff, it comes down to the burden of proof. I can't speak to that jurisdiction, but at least in the United States, you've got beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal case, and you've got sort of a more likely than not standard when it comes to civil cases. And so it's an easier burden of proof to make.
That makes sense. Dan, this past decade, the believe all women became a thing in a lot of these attacks. As a criminal defense attorney, what's your opinion on that motto or that slogan, believe all women?
I don't think you can believe all women any more than you can believe all men, any more than you can believe all midgets, any more than you believe all giants. I mean, it's silly to think that just because a woman says it, it must be true. I get it. The idea is what woman would lie about a sexual encounter because it exposes her to shame and attack and attacks on her morals and all that. And I get all that, but I don't think anybody is above lying or anybody is above deception, and I certainly don't think all of any section should believe. I mean, it's just crazy. All women must be believed. No, all women shouldn't be believed any more than all men versus anybody else.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Well, I think the pendulum's kind of swinging too, just, generally. More recently. I think across the board, not just in terms of viewpoint on the Me Too mindset, but also sort of like the viewpoint towards law enforcement and prosecuting criminals. I think there was a lot of distrust after 2020 and the George Floyd situation, and I think that's kind of coming back to the other side.
Let me go there and pitch one out to our listeners because, look, I've said it 100 times and I get tired of saying it, but I have great respect for the vast majority of police officers out there. And I still get from law enforcement folks, you're a sleazy criminal defense lawyer, you'll always lie, you'll say anything to get your client off. And if let me put it this way, if you are a seasoned police officer with more than 20 years of real-world experience and you have attained the rank of captain or above, and you wish to come on this show and explain to me why criminal defense lawyers as an entire profession or a breed should be diminished or discounted simply because of their job description, PM us, DM us, whatever the language is, well, I'll have you on. And I'm not here to debate you, but I'd love to hear why As a law enforcement officer, you can boldly state that all criminal defense lawyers are sleazy and none of them should be believed. That's a completely false statement, and it's no more true than for me to say all cops are sleazy and none of them should be believed. But if you meet that metric and you're out there and you've have more than 20 years of seat time with a major law enforcement agency, I don't want you coming in from Red Oak on your e-bike. But if you've been involved with a major law enforcement agency for more than 20 years and you've attained the rank of captain or above, and you want to come in and voice your displeasure about criminal defense lawyers, DM us. We'll see if we can have you on.
That's a good little teaser, Dan. I mean, we spoke a little bit off camera about this, but you might have a potential guest with this, not exact profile to that, but a law enforcement background.
Yeah,
right?
there's a friend of mine. I don't want to announce it until he's confirmed it, but he's been with the sheriff's office in here in Harris County for 35, 40 years. He's captain at least, but he's been very involved in managing the unions. He's a respected guy. I like him. I trust him. I think he would say the same about me. But I want to hear from law enforcement officers just as much as I think people need to hear from me. I think the other side of the coin is fair to have a voice. So I want to have Ray. I'm not going to say his last name, but you don't have to hunt for it very long. I'm going to have Ray on. But if there's somebody else out there, then let me know.
What is it?
I ain't flying you here on a G5 and putting you up at the Ritz-Carlton, but we'll see what we can do about expenses.
What are the key differences between a sheriff's office and police department? And do those relationships vary between lawyers?
Yeah, not to me. I mean, I have great respect, all things considered. I think the Texas Rangers are probably the best law enforcement agency I have dealt with over the years. I have had less bullshit coming from them than any other law enforcement agents. I think I have the highest distrust for ICE officials or ICE agents, and that's just my experience. That's not an indictment, department wide. But in terms of the different, Anthony, you've used them as resources.
Sure.
I don't see a big difference. I don't look at an HPD officer as any more qualified or less qualified than a Harris County Sheriff's Office. I'm sure there's a Hatfield and McCoy feud going on with each of them saying they're better than the other. I think the Harris County Sheriff's Department, I think their homicide division is exceptionally good. I think HPD has some outstanding divisions as well. But I don't look at the difference between Sheriff's Office and Police Department as any bright line in terms of qualifications or ability. But Anthony, what do you think?
I think they do. I think there's a
You think HPD thinks they're superior to Harris County?
and vice versa as a rivalry, kind of thing. But I think it's more in fun than anything. I think a big difference, at least from the Houston perspective, is that the sheriff's office utilizes a different crime lab than Houston Police Department. So you've got Harris County Institute of Forensic Science, which is in the near the Med Center, and it's or not near the Med Center, but farther down 288. Anyway, it's a well-renowned crime lab, and I think that their witnesses are pretty neutral. And I know that having interviewed them when I was a prosecutor, as opposed to the police department uses a city crime lab that's not affiliated with HPD. And I think some of the personnel at that office, they have a lot of turnover. So those are some of the key differences that I see as to why sheriff's office might have sort of more thorough investigations.
Yeah, I do think some of the precincts, which are technically a little different thing than the sheriff's office, I think you can have skill sets, ability, credibility vary significantly from precinct to precinct to precinct. In terms of the constable's office, I'm probably stepping on the words, and I don't want to tell you which ones I like and which ones I dislike. But look, law enforcement is just like dentists, just like body shop, just like they got good ones and they got bad ones.
And they've got great ones too. That's the thing.
Sure.
Both sides, HPD and sheriff's office, in my time when I was a prosecutor, I worked on a lot of cases. Most of my docket was murder cases, and so I had great experiences on both sides.
You do see, and I'm sure it's this way in a lot of areas, but forever, since I've had my bar card, since I rode my dinosaur to pick it up, you see literal physical, sexual, personal relationships between prosecutors and law enforcement. It's not at all unusual for a prosecutor to be married to a homicide detective or for a judge to be married to a sheriff's deputy. I mean, it's just, and part of that's understandable, but I don't know any defense lawyers that are married to cops or vice versa.
Unless they were a prosecutor for a long time.
I don't know.
I
can't name a single defense lawyer that is married to law enforcement.
Yeah.
Is there a profession that a defense lawyer tends to?
I mean,
we always talk about not.
Yeah,
keeping it out of the
with
courthouse.
all my marriages and all my relationships, the good and the bad, I've never dated law enforcement, not one time.
Wild is some of the stuff that we come across on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's not the first thing I want to talk about when I get home after work. So
you guys like a little lighter, a little
Look,
funner.
I'm married to a beautiful woman, and I'm lucky to have her in my life. But if she was a cop or even a lawyer, I'm not sure we'd ever gotten together. I got to flush my commode at some point, right? I can't keep carrying around this shit all day long and talk about it all day long. And when I get home, like Anthony's suggesting, I don't want to talk about it, right? And I'm sure it's just the asshole in me, but how was your day, honey, is met by me with almost inevitably a monosyllabic response. Good, bad, okay. Because I'm done. When I get home at 7:30 or 8 or 9, I don't want to talk about what I did all day because I'm tired of it and I'm done with it.
There's a trend that was popular online where they would rate somebody. They'd be like, "She's a 10, but he's a 10, but," and then gives like a little kicker. So Dan, if a girl's a 10 but she's a cop, what is her real score then?
She doesn't exist. She's a complete unicorn. I'm sure there are beautiful female law enforcement officers out there but I name me the 3 hottest cops you've ever seen.
I think the fact that they're a cop probably elevates the hotness factor.
You think so?
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
For sure.
No, there's a thing called, like, if you're a female lawyer, and I'm going to get hate on this, but bring it on. Come on.
I'm glad he's saying it, not me.
If you are and I know I'm an old geezer. I got more chins than a Chinese phone book. I'm an old, ugly, dusty. Get all that, concede it, plead guilty to it. But forever, there has been a belief system, and I'm not the only one that has it. That doesn't make it right. But if a woman just using your system is a 6 on a scale of 1 to 10, and she becomes a lawyer, she becomes an 8 or a 9, right? Immediately. And it's the same thing if you become a judge or a cop or whatever. So let the hate mail begin. But that's at least in my misogynistic, egotistic, what's the other word? What is it? Narcissistic, all those things. I'm sure y'all can fill in the blanks on everything else, whatever you want. But that's a thing.
That's hilarious.
Now, you're not getting off that easy. You are not.
I have comments blowing in my head, but I'm just, I think it's largely in part it's the title, right? It's to Dan's point, whoever would have gotten lucky with Miss Wiggins, right, would have been. Right. Because it's the teacher.
Look, it's the same with judges, right? If you become a judge, male or female, you've instantly dropped 30 pounds. Your jokes are 10 times funnier. Mm-hmm. You get invited to 5 times more functions. It's just a thing.
A little bit to do with the jailhouse effect. Like you look around, you're confined. I mean, in the practice of law, you spend a lot of time up at the office, right? And so you're looking at the same people and talent day in and day out. And so you kind of, your blinders are on, right, to the outside world. And what's in front of you becomes more attractive from time to time. So
you guys got to let it rip sometimes. You got to know, man, what are the top professions to elevate a look just based off skill?
I've never known a supermodel that gave up her career to become a prosecutor. No. I'll just leave it right there.
That's a lifestyle.
Well, boys, I wanted to cover another, a little bit more serious topic. DUIs and just, you know, some of the handling behind it, right? So DUIs, they start as a traffic stop but can snowball into fines, license yanks, jail stints, and a scarlet letter that might kill some careers. Prosecutors stack them to force pleas, hitting hardest on working folk. It's the gateway to the system's grinder. Tell me, Anthony, can you tell us a DUI tale that went from oops to like catastrophic? And
I'm just glad you went from Grinder to Anthony as opposed to Grinder to me.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about women enough.
Associated me with that.
To talk about.
Or sniffies. Well, my first DWI trial, we talked earlier about lessons learned, and I learned one that day, and it's to look at the entire piece of evidence before you admit it into trial. So it was my first trial. It was also my first not guilty. And we had entered the body-worn camera that had recorded the standardized field sobriety tests of the defendant in that case. What I didn't do, and I came on this case late, so I didn't have a lot of time to watch the entire 2.5-hour body-worn camera. But if you scroll to about 2 hours and 23 minutes into the video, you've got the arresting DWI officer specifically state, "I'm not really sure that she's intoxicated." And so I didn't see any of that until I sat down for my first part of closing argument, and the defense attorney stood up and pressed play on the CD. And once that officer statement came into the trial, the jury just kind of looked at me, and I stood up and cleared my throat for about 2 minutes and just tried to make the best of it. But yeah, that trial kind of went to shit in about 5 seconds.
There are a lot of videos online of like pretty women try to, get pulled over, and they're clearly pretty intoxicated, and they try to kind of finesse and talk their way out of it. What are your thoughts when you see something like that?
I think that a pretty woman has a better chance of being successful at doing that than I do, or Dan does, and I think it could happen. So it's not unheard of. It's certainly not impossible.
The only ticket I've ever talked my way out of is a meal ticket. I mean,
it doesn't work
talk
for
my
me.
way out of nothing.
No.
Well, is there one DUI myth, Dan, that drives you insane?
Well, look, DWIs are a really, I don't know what the word I'm searching for. They are far too incestuous of an offense, more incestuous of an offense than people imagine. Because if you're a steady drinker, right, you are going to be familiar with having 2 drinks or 3 drinks or 4 drinks and driving. You're going to develop, or at least think you're going to develop, a high tolerance. And the impetus to get behind the wheel and drive home is high, right? Even with the advent of Uber and everything else, people just want to drive their own car, particularly in Texas. It is a Texas thing where if you cede your keys to somebody else, it's like you've lost part of your manhood. People just don't want to do it. So to that extent, they're very dangerous, right? And people unintentionally commit DWIs every day. It's probably the most frequently committed crime by accident or without intent that there is, because I don't think anybody gets off at 5 o'clock and says, "Damn it, let's go commit a DWI," right? They just don't think of it in those contexts. So people engage in it without meaning to. It's not like cocaine or murder or rape. I mean, you have to intend to do those things, right? In DWIs, you don't. So it's particularly dangerous. I guess my biggest myth is that, there's all this debate about blow or not blow. There's a DWI lawyer here in town that's made a virtual career on his "do not blow" slogans. Well, I'll resist the urge to say something cute, and I'll move on from that. But Texas, like a lot of states, is an implied consent state, meaning if you get behind the wheel under the Texas Transportation Code, you have consented to a blood test or a blood draw, right, legally. So you don't even, by getting behind the wheel, you have effectively consented. The big question I always get, Aaron, is, okay, I'm stopped for DWI. What do I do? My advice to you is kind of nuanced. First, don't admit to consuming any alcohol. You know more or less if you've consumed more than 2 or 3 drinks, and it really takes, basically 3 drinks to get you above the legal limit if it's a strong pour. So the first thing I would tell you is don't admit consuming alcohol, don't consent to field sobriety test, and don't consent to a breath test or a blood draw. Now, can they get a blood test or a blood test if you don't consent? Yeah, but I don't like the idea of consenting to any sort of test or any sort of statements in a DWI case or any other case. It's the same advice. If you're stopped by law enforcement, shut the fuck up and ask for a lawyer.
Yeah, I think there's sort of 2 philosophies that I've heard from DWI lawyers. Some think, and to Dan's point, refuse everything, let them get a warrant, let them take your blood. Some lawyers I've heard openly state, no, you should blow because the breath test device is easier to do challenge in court. But I'm with Dan. I think that you've got to exercise your right to remain silent and refuse and let them get a warrant, and then give your lawyer a chance to fight the warrant in court on a later date. But it's one of those crimes that potentially judges and potentially the prosecutors that are handling them on the opposite side of the ball as a defense are not guilty of, but engage in the same behavior, right? And so
they're like understanding of it.
Well,
Yeah,
sometimes not. Sometimes it's a very hypocritical thing where you've got, in certain situations, you've got the prosecutor engaging in the same conduct as a defendant that they're prosecuting for something. It's just a matter of who got pulled over that night.
I've been sober for several years, and I've talked to several judges or prosecutors who have become sober since they left the office, and they've admitted to me in private, dude, I was the worst hypocrite of all. I'd come in hungover as I could be, probably still above a .08, and prosecute some guy and ask him for jail time. And I think that's a far more. And again, I'm not attacking DWI prosecutors en masse, but it's you would be naive to think that hypocrisy doesn't exist in significant doses every day, because it does.
No, I think that's great. What you guys covered there's a lot there, and we'll probably come back to this topic. It's just one that's too relevant to ignore. And I know Dan mentioned that we don't want too much of that type of content to showcase or represent you by any means, but people do have an appetite for this, and they want to better understand these situations.
Well, his advice goes past DWIs too. The remaining silent, you've got to give your name, rank, serial number, but outside of that, if you feel that you're being investigated, you don't have to divulge a bunch of information.
Look, it is by definition an adversary system, right? An adversarial system. It's a zero-sum game. Somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And the more information any person under investigation provides, the less chance they are going to prevail, and the greater the chance the other side is going to prevail. Information is power. So, like I always say, Nick Saban didn't hold a press conference on Friday and tell him what the game plan was. You tell them name, rank, and serial number, and that's it.
Yeah.
You are not, and people, I have represented judges, and too many lawyers to even recall where law enforcement shows up in their chambers or at their law office, and these judges or these lawyers, what do? Exactly what they would tell any other person not to do. I didn't want them to think I was guilty. I thought I could talk my way out of it. Guess what? If they're in your office or they're in your chambers with a subpoena or a request to see you, you're not talking your way out of shit. Shut up, Your Honor. It never ceases to blow me. I've had probably 4 or 5 judges over the years where literally law enforcement shows up with a subpoena or with an inquiry in the judge's chambers, and they try to talk their way out of it. It's just like, what game have you been watching, sir?
And you think that's triggered by fear in the moment?
It's adrenaline.
Well, they're used to being El Jefe. They're used to being the person in charge. They think they have a silver tongue, or they think they're quite clever. and their immediate, oh, what will my bailiff think, or what will my wife think if I don't answer the questions, trump the end game of you really need to have your lawyer answer these questions for you, or and not give them the information.
And you can exercise that right respectfully, right? So I think a lot of people try to mitigate their situation on the scene, and a lot of the times that's just not happening. So that's not to say that if the police show up, you're getting arrested, but oftentimes that is the case. And so instead of saying, you know, fuck you, I'm not talking, you can say I'd request to have a lawyer present for this line of questioning. And it's as simple as that.
Yeah,
Well, there was, and I won't mention the name, but there's now a person, I won't say male or female, that is on the district court bench, and they were dating somebody years ago, and that person got stopped for DWI. This person was then a defense lawyer, and this person's date, for lack of a better description, was getting arrested for DWI, and this then lawyer, now judge, got in the middle of that and was trying to act like, you know, Perry Mason at the scene, and this then lawyer, now judge, they got stuffed and cuffed, and guess what was in that person's personal space? Oh yeah, cocaine, right? That case ultimately got dismissed, but it's like, what are you doing? You're a lawyer, you know how this goes. I mean, it just, and we get it all the time. Lawyers, judges walk in here, and I probably represent as many judges and lawyers as anybody in town or anybody in the state, and I see it all the time.
Yeah.
No, that's
Shut up, Your Honor.
yeah. I keep role playing. I've never been in a situation like that, thankfully, but I keep, I always kind of think how it'd go, how it'd play. I like, what you talked about. I think there is a misconception for people approaching those conversations respectfully with the law enforcement, to be like, hey, because they're going to pressure and bully you into the situation, and I feel like handling that respectfully is difficult for most people.
Yeah, but the declination to talk isn't hard. It's like, officer, I know you know this, but I'd be disappointed in myself if I didn't follow the same advice I give to anybody else. I'm going to ask for a lawyer, and I appreciate you coming by. Thank you. We'll do everything we can to help you, but right now I'm going to talk to a lawyer. That ain't hard. It is the, you got nothing on me. I mean, the classic example, and it's good law enforcement to an extent, but they'll show up, knock on the door, and say, "Hey, I'm Officer Smith. Do you know why I'm here?" And even if the person says yes, that's an admission, right? Yeah. And they may or may not know, and they're probably saying, "Yeah, I know," just to go along, get along in the conversation. But again, the advice is, if the knock is on your door, if the pick up the phone and it's initials at the other end, if it's an email that has initials at the end of it, I appreciate you getting in touch with me. I'm going to talk to my lawyer, and we'll be back in touch, pal. Thank you.
Well, how about too, Dan, like when officers will tell people, well, this is your chance, right. If you don't cooperate now, then we're coming with the full wrath of the law. Let your lawyer negotiate for you in that regard.
The other side of that is they do not have the authority to cut a deal, right? So talk now or forever hold your peace. I'm your friend right now. No, you're not. You don't have the authority to give me immunity, to cut my sentence, or even give me a plea offer. No, you don't. But people, they take that bait every time.